Hey guys, I'm sure if you saw the title, you're wondering, just what I'm going to get into today, and the answer is that they're not real. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video, and I hope that you guys have a good one. I'm just kidding. Actually, this is kind of something that if you've been reading into any type of Marvel or DC or any type of other comics, growing up, even now. Any point in your life, you probably wondered, well, where are they here? Why aren't they here? I want to try to answer some of those questions. I want to try to answer questions like, why aren't they here? And if they are here, where are they? And maybe even ask the question of if, we see these events in comic books all the time where, heroes get brought over, villains get brought over from one universe to another. And so we're going to ask the question of what would happen if some of those people got brought over to our reality where we live. Okay, so immediately, you ask the question of, we live in a world with a population that has now breached over 8 billion. That's a lot of people. I mean, I remember growing up, and that, I think that the level was around 6.5 to 7, and then, we're at 8 now, which is a crazy explosion of population, and a lot of that comes from, medical and, just all of these different accessibilities that allow us to live longer. Again, medical stuff, medicines, surgeries, all of that fun stuff. So, a population of 8 billion, you would think that by now we would have at least one person who maybe doesn't even have powers, but is trying to do something. And so the first one that comes to my mind is, for instance, Batman. Obviously, this is, again, pretty obvious for most. Batman does not have any powers. He is one of the only, and not one of the only, but again, one of the only across the board that really does not have powers, and so his power is kind of aligned more in the idea that he is incredibly rich and intelligent. All right, so we have guys that are incredibly rich. I don't really know about incredibly intelligent, right? For a lot of you, the first one that may come to mind is like Elon Musk, but I'm not going to lie, this is my honest opinion. I have a lot of doubts, honestly, about his actual intelligence, but rather maybe he is not super intelligent himself, but smart enough to garner those more intelligent to be around him, right? So that's kind of the idea, is that he hires all of these engineers that are able to, kind of build what he is envisioning in his mind that he may not know how to build, which in itself, that's smart. Getting people smarter than you, having the ability to understand that you need to let go of the ego of wanting to be the smartest and knowing that you need people who are smarter than you to get to where you want to go. So anyways, Elon Musk, no superhero at all. That one's pretty obvious. And so you start to ask the question of, well, would we hear about it? And the answer is obviously yes. If there was someone like Batman, that would be everywhere, right? And a lot of you are thinking, well, he'd probably just get killed. And I'd actually argue, yes, but let's take a hypothetical where he doesn't immediately get killed. Okay, and so this is kind of where my mind is wanting to go more towards the answer now, rather asking questions. And so the answer to that is that there is absolutely, in a population of 8 billion, right? But let's consolidate that to just maybe Europe and America. There is absolutely somebody with enough resources, but not only that, the intellectual prowess, which it would take to not die, and what it would take to not die in the real world is a lot of technology. For instance, bulletproofing, but light enough to be able to, not weigh you down, but flexible enough to sustain movement, Obviously, this stuff is doable, but there is one thing that I think that we lack in this reality that is an element of the suspense of disbelief in other realities. And no, I'm not talking about magical powers or anything like that. Actually, I'm talking about the simple ability for humans to be good. Hey, I don't know if you guys have realized this, but most people are pretty awful, it seems. You know, especially the ones that have all the money, especially the ones that have all the power. They're pretty awful. And it's almost as if you cannot have somebody who garners this much wealth, or anything like that, and have them not be morally corrupted. That's the first issue. And then immediately your brain may ask, well, if they're morally corrupt, then why wouldn't they be a villain version of that? Well, there's no point. If you're morally corrupt, then, you know, again, this isn't, like, there are a lot of things going on, you know, that I've talked about in past videos, scientifically, that we don't understand, right? And that could be fantasy to a lot of people. To me, that's science that we haven't discovered yet, you know, in terms of dreams, paranormal, multiversal quantum theory, all of that. But there is also an element where the idea of somebody getting, you know, basically Bruce Wayne is like a trillionaire, so to speak, but he might as well be. I would argue that it wouldn't be possible for somebody in this reality to garner that much money and not be thrust into a place of complacency, right? And then you also have to understand one of the core backings of Bruce Wayne's character, which is the death of his parents, right? And the idea that somebody would be so motivated to actually, you know, go out and pursue this level of wearing a costume and beating the crap out of people because his parents got shot in an alleyway. At the end of the day, most people are going to get over that. And I know that that kind of sounds, you know, not very nice, but the idea is that if that happened to you at 8, like, the average person would probably get counseling. They would probably do something to get to a place, you know, where they're better off mentally. But let's say they didn't. The idea that they're suddenly going to be now living in like a mansion by themselves with billions of dollars is also, you know, not really ever the case. So it's like the statistics needed to crunch down to actually allow a circumstance like this to happen probably just haven't happened yet, because, I mean, again, we live in a world where we know so much and we're able to look into so much. And there would kind of be an element where there would be somebody out there who, you know, be recognizing some type of patterns, and then they'd be talking. I don't know. But let's kind of move away from the idea of, you know, needing this horrible background and backstory and emotional turmoil, and kind of get more into, you know, the realistic side of it, which is that there are, you know, people who are incredibly intelligent. There are people who have pushed their bodies to the maximum potential. There are people who have figured out how to, you know, crack every lock, how to get out of any type of trap. You know, they have trained with escape artists. They've basically done the Batman regimen training, which is training in every form of martial arts, every form of fighting, MI6, Navy SEAL, military, Russian KGB, anything. You know, like, they've trained in all of these things, and they're incredibly smart, again. So if anyone is gonna become some type of, like, superhero, it'd be them. And they exist, so where are they? I'll answer that for you really simply. They've been hired. I want to move back again to the morally corruptible thing. I genuinely do not believe, and I hate to admit this, but I just really don't believe that there would be somebody with that much, you know, energy and time spent, right, who would not be, in the sense, corruptible to the idea of somebody approaching them and being like, hey, you haven't noticed, but we've noticed everything that you've been doing, and we want to hire you. You're going to get paid 1.2, and they're like, 1.2 mil? And they're like, no, 1.2 bill. And you're going to go and go into a team with 2 others, and you're going to destabilize this country. And we are going to put in a fox, you know, a fake leader, basically. Maybe this sounds familiar. to you history buffs. But basically the idea being is that these guys who have the power to basically be Batman, like if they wanted to, if they put on a bulletproof suit and they had all of the gadgets and tech, they could, in theory, go to New York, I don't know, somewhere, and they could be successful for maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, maybe longer, maybe the whole course, right? But again, it takes a lot of technology, even for Batman to be able to, kind of exist and what we have existing today. So let's kind of move away from that then. Let's kind of move away from Batman. Obviously, Batman being the most realistic, and already it seems that he's not very realistic because there's a lot of factors leading into the idea that he wouldn't exist mentally, physically, any of these things. So let's kind of get into Captain America, right? The idea of Captain America, you have a military installation which is experimenting with some type of superhuman, genetic mutation thing, right? And he goes from like 5'5" to 6'3" or whatever, and really, really strong and all of that, and it's like a superhero serum, right? So the idea of that too, it's like, okay, well then, that doesn't seem impossible. Why don't we have Captain America? Well, guys, I'm sorry to tell you, but again, even if, and I would actually be 80-20 on this. 80 that they have successfully made some type of, project or injected somebody with, something that made them stronger, faster, whatever. I would argue that is, happening. I don't know, just in America, Europe, I don't know, anywhere. Obviously that would take a lot of scientific, inquiry and looking into, and tons of money. But the idea that they would form these individuals who are having probably billions of dollars pumped into them, thrust them to the front page, I doubt it. If they're gonna spend all of this money making these individuals, it'd kind of be like them making a B-2 bomber, right? They don't want to make a new stealth plane and then post it everywhere for everyone to see. That's just not what they want to do. Just like if they were to spend billions of dollars on this stealth plane equivalent of a U.S. fighter, an on-ground grunt soldier, right, they'd probably keep that hidden in the same way for a while until it became more believable, at least. So what I could see happening for sure is that right now we're not going to get anything about this ever. There's not going to be like, oh, by the way, we have a Captain America equivalent that is going and helping destabilize the countries with the, smart, I don't know, but if we're not going to get that, what's going to happen is that we're going to get the technology, and some people are going to start asking, well, it seems like we'd be able to do that if we really wanted to. And immediately they're going to be like, hey guys, so we created this new drug that basically makes Captain America, and then it's going to come out and it's not going to be crazy at all. And also the idea of any of that, of Captain America, of any of that, definitely comes from real life inspiration of actual projects that went on, with the Nazis and experimentation. Unfortunately for the Nazis, a lot of them were just pumped with LSD and thrown out on the field. Definitely not the same. But again, if that testing was going on, in the 1930s, 40s, 50s leading up to now, you would have to imagine they figured it out. So, we got Captain America, most likely, and I don't mean that it's literally a soul, like Captain America, like this could be generalistic to the sense that this could be any country that has enough money to fund a project like this and it not be leaked and not be, anyways. But then you get into the idea of like, okay, well, there isn't really a ton of like other superheroes that have powers that, like Spider-Man. It's like, just there's no way really for that to happen, right? And then the Hulk, you just die. In a lot of these cases where people get powers, you would just die, right? And then you ask the question, okay, what if Batman is brought over to our reality? Well, realistically, he dies. I'm sorry, I love Batman. I need to be very clear about that. I love Batman, but if you brought Batman over here, realistically, he's gonna get caught, and there isn't plot armor where we live. There isn't this, grandiose sense of everything is gonna constantly be okay for you because you want it to be, where you have this dichotomy where in writing, you're making comic books, you're making movies, you're making stories, and obviously you need this main character to persevere, to live on. But there isn't really that sense of that here, right? And in fact, I would argue that a lot of the perseverance that you end up seeing is perseverance of people who, I don't know, they're just not the best people. They don't have love and goodness in their heart. And of course, that's not everyone. There are some people who make it to the very end of their life who have lived their entire life incredible people, right? But if you were to bring even Spider-Man, to our reality, that boy's getting shot. And I know you're saying, oh, you just dodge it and jump it. It's like, at the end of the day, minus like Hulk or Ghost Rider, right? If you know anything about them, they're pretty much indestructible. You're not doing anything against them. Like, I don't know. We're just sending our military and literally destroying them. I don't know. There's no chance for them. Which is really sad. Okay, so you kind of have this idea. You've asked this idea, why are there no superheroes in our reality? Well, the answer to that is that they've been bought to go do mercenary assignments. Like they're probably not mentally Batman, they're mentally Deathstroke level. And for those who don't know who Deathstroke is, he basically is somebody who has a Captain America-like superhero serum, but in universe, it's just a military thing. And he's a really good fighter, is on par with Batman, really smart, all of that. So the whole shebang. If there are people at that level, at Batman's level, they're probably more aligned with that and aligned with they don't have any type of no kill rule. They don't have any type of like no injury or anything like this. They're just going in and they're getting the job done because they're able to do it better than anyone. That is very real, and that is currently going on in today's world. And probably today, as I make this video, somebody at that level is, doing that. And then again, we go and get into Batman and all of this. You just don't really have somebody who isn't morally corruptible in today's society. So the chance for Batman to even really, even if someone's parents are shot and they have billions of dollars, like the idea for Batman to even still have the chance to come up and actually exist is almost nothing, right? Because that kid's either just gonna go off the deep end or get really, really good therapy. And whenever I say go off the deep end, I don't mean turn into Batman. I mean like something actually bad. But it does kind of suck, it'd definitely make it more fun if we had this kind of stuff going on. And obviously, again, like Superman, that one is really fun. I love the Superman comics. I love the idea of it, but obviously I do not, and I've made a video about this, I do not believe in the idea of any alien species coming to Earth, making their way to Earth, spending the time to get to Earth, sending anything to Earth. We're not special. We're not in the middle of anything. We're just a random planet in the universe, and there's no reason for aliens to come here. But, I don't know. If they did, it wouldn't be a Superman situation for sure, in my opinion. But what if Superman did come to Earth? What would that look like? Well, I mean, it would really honestly, like the comics display, depend on who raises him, right? And who raises him would be the U.S. government, because even if some family in Kansas found him, they're going to come out there and take him away, and that's going to be that. And then we're going to have a Homelander situation, basically. Awesome. But the chances of that are next to nothing. luckily. Again, guys, we're living in reality, right? But I want to touch on one more aspect of all of this, kind of like completing this pie chart, right? And in my opinion, the last part of it is, well, they're not real, right? And to an extent, they couldn't be real. And not that they couldn't be real, it's just that they wouldn't be superheroes. They're there, but they're not heroes or anything like that, and they're not even in the public eye. But what motivates somebody to have this idea? I actually got into this on a past video with my roommate, I think yesterday or the day before, where we discussed the idea of how Thomas Edison, had this idea of, or had a dream where in the dream he constructed the light bulb. And then from that dream, he was like, well, what the heck was that? I want to try to do that. And then he did it. And at the moment of him making it and being successful and turning it on and it working, the idea that due to the quantum multiversal theory and the idea of a always oscillating frequency that we're giving off, at the moment that he completed the light bulb, he sent that moment as like a mental snapshot into a dream, into the past self of him, right? And that's why he had the dream of him building the light bulb. So it's like this constant back and forth, right? And it negates space and time, obviously. So you have a connection that negates time itself, but is still moving through space. What I'm trying to say with all of this is, where do these ideas come from? And are they totally abstract? Are they totally fiction? Or are we maybe tapping into the same source that allows us to have dreams that, predict the future, or know that somebody's going to die soon, or know that we're going to die soon, or know that whatever, there's a lot of people all across the world who have had experiences where, they've had daydreams or dreams or visions or whatever of stuff happening, and then it happens. That's not, it's a phenomenon, but it's not unheard of at all. It happens a ton. So what if, and what if, stay with me here, all of this, everything that we could imagine mentally, it's just some type of shared consciousness between every version of what exists, right? And the idea being is that we can't have a new idea. What the ideas that we have are stuff that we have seen, maybe not even that I have seen or that you have seen, but a version of us has seen, and it's a matter of how it gets translated back to us. Like, for instance, with Spider-Man, his name, okay, so I believe his name was like Ditko, or and then you have I don't know. It's kind of really sad that I'm forgetting the name of all of the writers right now, but you have all of these writers for all of these superheroes, and it's like, well, again, what if they're tapping into that same, source? And what if by tapping into that source, they're not getting the full picture, but they're getting enough? And then they kind of take that and spin it and, go their own route with it. That's really kind of a cool idea. I hope that makes sense. The idea that there isn't really unique ideas. It's just all kind of a shared thing that we can't really understand because it's more spiritual than anything. But it is scientific, again. But we're not just totally making this up. Like, it exists to a capacity somewhere, but it doesn't exist here. But to the capacity that it does exist here, it does exist massively. Here's what I mean by that. The lack of all of these heroes, right, has stimulated, completely blown open the market for all of this stuff to become one of the largest merchandising media outlets. All of this focus is going on to these heroes. It's one of the largest money-making things in today's day. Without a doubt. I mean, easily superheroes and the whole, universe that they've created within, here, our reality, right? That is just one of the largest things, period. In my opinion, that doesn't come from nothing. And again, I would actually really encourage you guys, if you're interested in all that dream stuff and what I just mentioned, to go and watch my previous videos where I try to break some of that down. I try to. It's very difficult. But yeah, I hope that in some form or fashion, you know, the answer to as to why we're not seeing any of these guys, why I believe that we won't, honestly, why we couldn't as well. And it's a fun thing to think about. But unfortunately, all of the boys got hired away. They were over in other countries, and they're doing probably pretty wretched stuff. So I think that's where I'm going to leave y'all today. I know this is a really random topic, but I've just been thinking about it. Thought it would be a fun thing to make a video about. I'll probably be back on here today, not going to lie. Another video, definitely not about this. But we'll see. Hopefully you guys have a good one.